Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Today, I want to talk about how you guys can navigate the map to your soul's mission. Um, One of the things that I've noticed with so many people when they're starting to wake up and come into their awareness is this idea of what is my purpose? How do I bring more meaning into what I do? We often, so many times, see people shifting out of careers, relationships falling apart, and we just don't know what's aligning anymore with our truth. And what is our truth becomes a very important question. But how do you discover that given what we've been taught throughout our entire life of what truth actually is? So today I want to talk to you guys about two things. We're going to talk about two things. The first thing is we're going to talk about what are the two things you need to navigate the map of your soul mission. And then we're also going to talk about the importance of union of your divine masculine and feminine energies and how that creates a successful mission for you in this lifetime. So I just want to draw here for you guys the yin and the yang. Okay, we have the yin and the yang. Okay, the yin is our feminine energy, and the yang is our masculine energy. Now, many times when you're trying to figure out what it is that you really want to do in your life, what is it that really, lights you up, we're taught to follow our bliss. Follow your bliss and you're going to find your dreams, you're going to find exactly what it is that you want to do. And that's true to a point, but it's really only half of the equation because that is essentially your yang energy. But we really need, if we want to bring in the balance, you have to understand what is it in the yin. And the yin is all about going inward. It's self-reflective. And oftentimes, it's about understanding what are you most scared of? What are your deepest fears? And so when we can bring into union what you're most scared of and what lights you up, you actually then get to not walk just the path of bliss or just walk the path of fear, but you get to walk through the center, which is the void between the polarities. And we live in a place of duality right now. That's our whole lesson. Why we're here on earth right now is to live this reality of the dualities. It's how we learn. And so we're often going back from one place to the other. We're learning, going into the deeper, darker shadows of ourselves, but then also going into the really fun and joyful aspects of ourselves. And the only way to really come into this balance is going all the way over here and going all the way over here. You need to know both sides. So understanding that your passions, what brings you joy, what really lights you up inside, is probably the first thing you want to discover. It's the one thing you want to start asking yourself about. What is it that you really love doing? Because if you're going to be here on this planet and you're going to be living out your soul's mission, you want to enjoy it to some degree. You really want to have fun. And having fun is a really high frequency. It's a beautiful frequency to have. And so going into your yang energy, understanding what lights you up is so important. So for instance, for me, what lights me up is talking about this very thing. I've always loved spirituality since I was a teenager, which I'm just amazed. Is it Garen who's 16? Yeah, awesome. When I was 17 is when I really started to come into more of my awareness, is when I started to meditate and started listening to Gregorian chants. And before I knew it, I didn't even know what meditation really was, but just listening to it started to put me into a different state of mind. And I started to understand that, wow, I really like this feeling. I really like this peaceful sense of balance that's coming in, this connection that I'm receiving. And I just started to research and just read books, and I was just really into spirituality. this is one of my passions. It's also one of my passions to just dive deep and go into the craziest parts of what it is. There isn't anything too crazy to explore as far as I'm concerned. But what also scares the crap out of me is public speaking. When I was a child in elementary school, in the springtime, we would be having public speaking events. It was every year, and every year I dreaded it. I couldn't stand it, I hated it. I literally was shaking, probably a month or two coming up to the public speaking events. And I would look at my mom, and I'm like, you need to write my speech. I have nothing worth saying. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who wants to listen to me. And I just need your help. You have to write the whole thing for me, and then I'll just read it on cue cards, and everything will be fine. This was such a fear of mine that I couldn't sleep. And I probably, for the entire year of school, was dreading it. The only great thing about the public speaking event was that I knew I'd have another year of reprieve before I'd have to do it again. And so part of my fear was around the fact that I didn't believe that I had anything worth listening to. Like, I had nothing worth saying, that people wouldn't want to listen to me. That was a huge part of my fear. The other part was that I just couldn't seem to get a good connection of what was in my mind. And then when I went to go verbally say it, it never came out the way it was in my mind. And so I struggled, even in my relationships with men, of communicating. I didn't know how to communicate properly. I had all these great things going on in my head, and it sounded so awesome up there. But when I went to actually speak it, nothing came out the way it sounded in there. In fact, oftentimes nothing came out. And I had my partners would look at me and say, "What's going on up there?" And I'm like, "You don't want to know." And so this became an issue. So if you're obviously looking at me today, there's a little bit of fear here of standing up here and speaking in front of you, because I'll tell you something. Speaking on my webcam in my bedroom when no one's around and putting it on YouTube is a little different than what it is right now and speaking in front of all of you. But also, there is a huge bonus. I get to feed off of all of your energy, and I get to interact with all of you. Now, when I was in my mid-20s, I had a dream that and not an actual dream, but in my mind, it was a dream of mine of actually doing what I'm doing right now in this very moment. That I could speak about spirituality and assist other people in having the courage to face their truth and deeper meaning within their life. But I couldn't understand why my dream had me standing on a stage publicly speaking. It just didn't make any sense to me. And so when I started to understand that I needed to marry my fear with one of my greatest passions, I was able to come into this polarity, the void of the polarity, where is pretty much where all the magic happens. And this is so important because you need to be challenged. You need to go outside your comfort zone in order to grow. As they say, nothing grows inside the comfort zone. We need to push ourselves. If we constantly want to expand our awareness, if we constantly want to expand who we are, we need to add a certain level of positive stress. And going into your fears, believe it or not, is a positive stress. Now, not to the point where you may be having an anxiety breakdown or anything like that, but you work into it slowly. I certainly didn't get here overnight. It took years of me getting comfortable with who I am and doing a lot of deeper shadow work. So, navigating the map of your soul's mission, you need to find out what lights you up, and what scares the shit out of you. And somewhere in the middle of that is where you're going to be really successful and where you're going to make an impact in this world. And it's going to come from a place of authenticity, which people are attracted to. People want you to show up authentically. They're naturally attracted to the truth. No one likes a liar. And as you become more aware, you naturally build your discernment muscle and your BS meter gets a lot stronger. So you know when someone's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Now, the next thing that you need to understand, and this is so important, this is actually one of my favorite things to talk about. I think it's so important, especially in this particular time that we're in, is understanding the energies of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. This is nothing to do with gender. This is about the energies of creation. And the energies of creation have a balance of feminine and a balance of masculine, which means each and every one of you has the feminine and the masculine energies within you. So, our yin is our feminine, and our yang is our masculine. Now, from my experience, for most of you in this room, not everyone, but for most of you in this room and most people who are really awakening to their spiritual journey and are really into the meditation and learning more about their cosmic heritage and just really taking a deep dive into all of it, you're going to actually do well on the yin side. So you're more reflective. You're willing to go into the deeper shadows of your soul. You may not want to look right into the deepest, darkest parts, but you're willing to start looking. You're willing to take meditation into practice. Be still. This is your feminine energy. You've got a lot of creativity. You've got a lot of ideas. You've got a lot of things that really kind of tap into the heart energy. The yin is your heart energy. The yang is more of the mind. And so your emotions, a lot of you are likely empaths, if not all of you, except for Brian. So your emotions play such a huge role in this journey, okay? Because you become a very powerful manifester when you tap into your emotions. Your emotions are your driving engine to manifest what you want in this reality. And a lot of you are really good at that. You're really good at tuning into what emotions really are powerful for you and how to use that in creating your reality here, what you want to show up. So the feminine energy is all about stillness, it's about compassion, it's about nurturing. It's about stillness, reflectiveness, going inward. It's the moon. It's the negative energy. And when I say negative energy, I don't mean negative in like bad. It's the negative charge of energy. And this is so important to really understand because it's kind of the origin part of your creation process is the feminine energy. It's the intangible. It's what you can't see. It's what you can't really touch. And knowing what that is and how to work with that is very important. And a lot of times, you're really good at it. So that's really great. What trips a lot of people up is when they need to go into their masculine energy to execute it and bring it into this reality. Your masculine energy is everything in the physical. Okay? So if you want to think about it this way, your yin, your feminine, is 5D, and your masculine is 3D, just for simplicity's sake. So how do you take the etheric, how do you take the intangible and bring it into your now, into your actual world so that you can see your dreams and your hopes and your passions take form here right now? The masculine energy is all about truth and speaking your truth. When I was putting this, my outline for this talk together, I was given a few messages, and one of them was to focus on the throat chakra. The throat chakra is the color blue. Blue is the color of truth. Now, for me, I had a lot of issues with speaking my truth. I had a lot of issues in communication. The communication was cut off from the heart to hear, and also was cut off from the mind to hear. So one of the things I realized when I did some past life regression is that I actually had experienced a lot of persecution in my past lives for speaking the truth. I was either killed or put into solitary confinement so no one could hear me. And if you're not aware, your DNA holds all of the memories of all of your past lives. You carry that with you. And so oftentimes, many of us don't even realize that we've got this trauma from past lives for speaking our truth that is preventing us from wanting to go there because we're so scared. It's got this trigger in us that we're afraid that if we actually do speak our truth, something bad's going to actually happen to us. And so I had to actually go through a little bit of healing because I knew that I really wanted to do this, but I knew there was a block and I just couldn't understand what it is. So when I finally did some past life regressive healing, that's what allowed me to kind of release this block that was around my throat and allow me to start moving into where I am right now. Now, your masculine energy is very important. Your masculine energy is all about structure. It's all about the mind. It's analytical. It's linear. Okay? It's also protective. How to understand the importance of having boundaries is all about your masculine energy. Now, boundaries are very important. It's something that gets overlooked when we're going into the deep spiritual journey. Okay, when we're playing around in 5D, when we're playing around in the astral realm, when we're playing around in our meditation and going into different dimensions, we forget about the need to bring in our masculine energy for protection. Protection is very important because just like you have a lock on your door and you're not just going to let anyone into your home, you don't want to just let anyone into your energetic field because especially if you're an empath, you take that energy on and it starts to muddy up your own energy and it starts to slow things down. So understanding the importance of boundaries is very key for understanding your masculine energy. Your masculine energy is all about taking action. It's all about putting things out into this real world. And one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of people is they're scared to start doing things, executing things. They're really good at like going with the flow and knowing that spirit's taking care of them and everything's just going to work out. If I meditate all the time, things are bound to happen. And that's very false because you're not honoring your masculine energy. If that's all you needed to do, you wouldn't be here in a physical, corporeal body. Your vessel is giving you a very unique opportunity to be here in this physical realm, on this planet, in this 3D dimension, to execute all of the beautiful work that you're meant here to execute. If you could do it from wherever everyone else is, then this place would already be different, but that's not the case. So understanding the importance of your masculine energy is key to executing a successful mission here. So, what does your masculinity look like in your life right now? What does your feminine energy look like in your life right now? These are two questions that you want to ask yourself. What am I doing with my feminine energy? Am I meditating? Am I paying attention to my dreams? Am I going into stillness? Am I walking in nature? Am I tuning into my emotions? Am I bringing my emotions into a healthy state? Now, I say that because you have two aspects of your feminine energy and two aspects of your masculine energy. For the feminine, you have what's the original blueprint, which is wild feminine and wild masculine. But the traumatized is wounded feminine. and wounded masculine. And that's where many people are. So wounded feminine is when you're really overly emotional. It's where you're very sensitive to things. It's where you're triggered. You're also manipulative, emotionally manipulative when you're in wounded feminine energy. You're not in control of your emotions. You're not having them in a healthy state where they're serving you well. That is wounded feminine. It's also the victim energy. If you're playing into this idea that everything is happening to you and you have no control over it, and you're not taking responsibility for anything, that is wounded feminine. Wounded masculine is known as the perpetrator. It's known as when you're in your wounded masculine, you're very aggressive. It's a lot of violence, manipulation of the mind, criticism of the mind. So if you're really overly critical of yourself, you're in your wounded masculine. If someone's really critical of you, they're expressing wounded masculine energy. However, wild masculine is providing structure, stability, protection, action-oriented. It's all about what's lighting you up. It's about executing everything in the physical to serve you well. So when you understand these two things, you are in a really good position to move into this void. And remember, it's okay to be on the other sides of the polarities. You need to understand what the extremes are in order to get into the center. If you haven't experienced it yet, you don't have that teacher of experiential learning, and that's why we're all here. So don't judge yourself if you do go into the extremes of these polarities. It's very important for you to understand what they are so that you know how to find center, and if it happens, you know how to get back to center. And one of the things I really want to talk about today is this new thing that's coming out in the world, in our news, called toxic masculinity. And I want to talk about it because we're here to talk about speaking your truth, living your truth. And what's interesting is our full moon that's happening in 2 days, which is also the total lunar eclipse, what the main energy around this moon is so divinely timed is asking you, how are you showing up in this world? This is what this whole moon is about. It's one of the major energies. How are you showing up in this world? And for me, it's so important to speak my truth now, to live authentically. And when something is resisting truth, and I see where the energy is trying to take it into an inverse, if you understand the world we live in, many truths are inversed for us so that we believe that that is the truth. And toxic masculinity is one of those things. There is no such thing as toxic masculinity. And there is no such thing as toxic femininity. There is such a thing as assholes, and they are male and female. But there is no such thing as toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. And the reason why this is coming out right now is for all of you, not just men, but all of you, to be ashamed of your masculine energy. Your masculine energy is what allows you to create in the physical. It's what allows you to feel empowered, to create, to finish off the creation cycle. And what this toxic masculinity is trying to do is to prevent you from actually living out your truth and living out your dreams. So when I see in the news and we see these psychology groups talking about toxic masculinity and how this is actually a thing, it makes me actually really angry. It's one of my biggest triggers. And I'm okay with that because I know that that's part of my soul mission is to make sure that people truly understand what it means to be feminine and what it means to be masculine. And taking us into shame of the inherent energies that we were given, the inherent energies of creation, is a total attack on our divinity. So knowing your truth is so important, and knowing how to find that truth within your own masculinity and femininity allows you to come into union within yourself. Union always starts with you first. There's a lot of talk out there about union of your twin flame or union of your soulmate and all that fun stuff. And whether or not you believe in it or not doesn't matter. What matters is that you come into union for yourself. Once you come into union within you, with your masculine and your feminine energy, when you come into union with you and your higher self, with you and the divine, the creator, God, however you want to acknowledge it or recognize it, that is when everything else in your life will start to show up in union. Your whole reality will shift into a reality of union. And that is essentially bringing the mind and the heart into union. When you bring the masculine and the feminine, you bring the mind and the heart into union, so that you can use your emotions to fuel your manifestation desires, and then take the logic and the clarity. The clarity is so important. That's masculine energy. When you take the clarity and the emotions, you are now creating a very specific path forward that allows you to really create a pathway for yourself to what it is you want to do and how you want to show up in this world. So one of the things I do tarot readings. I use the tarot, and I actually use the tarot for this talk because I wanted to know from Spirit, what are some of the messages that you really want me to focus on for this talk? And one of the major things was standing up for yourself and speaking your truth. So your masculine energy is standing up for yourself. It's about standing for what you believe is true. It's for standing up for what you believe is right in this world. And if you're not standing up for yourself, if you're not standing up for your beliefs, then the universe is going to respond to you in that way. Your reality is going to be created to support that. So, are you standing up for yourself? Are you standing up for what really lies in your heart? And are you willing to protect it and speak your truth? So, how are you protecting your dreams? How are you providing the structure and the boundaries around it so that you can execute it here in the world? Because you all come here to do something very special. All of you have. There isn't one person in this room who hasn't. And one of the messages, there's two messages that came through. It's very important to understand what lights you up. And also, they wanted me to tell you that all of you have been training for lifetimes for this particular lifetime. You have been training for lifetimes for this moment. You are ready and you have everything that you need to do whatever it is that is in your heart and bring it out into this physical world to make the changes that you would like to see. Your inner world is reflected in your outer world. So everything that's going on inside of here shows up out there. So when you start to make all the changes within you, naturally the changes start to occur around you. Your reality just instantly shifts. It's instant. And you will be amazed at how people start to respond to you. People that you didn't even know would be interested in some of the stuff that you might be thinking about, doing, talking about. Always understand that the way to execute the best change in this world is to be the model. When you look at children, they mimic everything we do. That's how they learn. That's how we learn, believe it or not, even still as adults. We observe and we mimic, especially if there's something we really like. Sometimes we mimic things we don't like. If you think about, oftentimes we're like, oh, God, I sound like my mom. Oh, I'm doing just what my dad did. Oh, my God, I'm turning into my dad. You know, these things can happen. So you want to be very aware of how you're showing up in the world, because you may not realize it, but people are watching you and they're observing you. And you can shift their reality simply by honoring your truth and just living it out as perfectly as you wish to do so. So having this union is so important. And I kind of want to take some questions right now, because I know this can be a confusing topic sometimes. I get a lot of questions on this through my YouTube channel and emails about the masculine and feminine energies. So I want to know if anyone in the audience has any questions about the masculine and feminine, or any questions about what's come up, or if you need to share anything to get more clarity on it, you can. We'll get you a mic, Paul.
How do you know? How do you know if you're in balance or not, personally?
Well, that's a great question. You need to look at your life. Now, from a feminine energy aspect, are you overly emotional? Or are your emotions stable? That is probably one of the first things that I would check for your femininity. Are you taking the time out to have quiet time for yourself, to be reflective? If you're not taking any time to be reflective, you're not honoring your feminine energy. Are you, and that can be different for many people. Sometimes people just like to allow things to come into their mind. Some people like to write and journal. Some people just want to meditate. So that can look differently for all of you. There is no one specific way that is right and works for everyone. It just doesn't work that way. And I know Greg's going to talk about being wired differently and all that later on. But the feminine energy also, okay, so let me give you an example. I was very out of touch with my feminine energy until I moved into my 30s. I actually dishonored my feminine energy. I thought being a woman was weak. I thought I would have been better off had I been born a boy. And oftentimes I had wished I had been a boy. And I had a hard time living in this body of a female because I didn't honor my femininity. And so I moved into my masculine energy, and I was a doer. I actually became a bit of a workaholic in my 20s, and all I would do was work. And I was just concerned about how much money I could make to support myself and what I needed to accumulate asset-wise. What did I need for status so that I felt successful in this world? Worrying about like what people saw on the outside as my level of success. And I also worked out a lot. I wasn't doing yoga yet. And I would push myself. On top of that, my job, I was a massage therapist. So I was physically working all day, sometimes 8 or 9 massages a day. And then I go to the gym. My body was depleted. I was not doing anything to nurture myself. Nurturing yourself is an important component of your feminine energy. It wasn't until I took a 1-year sabbatical, I had to go to the extreme. Because I had gone so extreme to the masculine, I had to go so extreme to the feminine. I quit my job, I took a 1-year sabbatical, and I decided to travel by myself. And I started with a 10-day silent meditation retreat in Costa Rica. And I needed that. I needed to go inward. I needed to take the time for just myself and completely disconnect from the world. And it was in a yoga class that I realized I have been taking and taking and taking from myself without ever giving back. I was completely in my masculine energy. And so I started to do yoga to give back to my body. My body was the first thing that I needed to really work on, in sense that I had just depleted myself physically. So for you, how are you nurturing yourself? So I had to honor myself when I needed to sleep. I would start just sleeping. I would do yoga, but not like a power yoga. I was more into the yin yoga. I love yin yoga more than the regular yoga, just because I'm so naturally yang in what I do. So you need to find out what works for you. So how are you in your masculine energy? Are you someone who has all these great ideas, but they're just left floating out there in the ethers and they're never actually coming to fruition? That means you're not in your masculine energy. Okay, you're not executing. You're not getting clarity. You're not getting structure put around it. So building boundaries and building structure for yourself is really important. So, Paul, is there anywhere in your life that you can see where you're maybe more feminine or more masculine or both?
I'd like to think I'm balanced.
We'd all like to think we're balanced. But be honest.
No?
You're perfect.
I'd like to think that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, you figured it all out then, haven't you?
I don't know that answer.
Okay.
That's the problem.
Yes, I understand that. It is hard. And it's one of those things where you really have to get honest, and that's where the truth comes in. That's where you really have to go into the deeper, darker parts of you. And that's where you have to really look at your fears. You have to look at your fears and how they may be holding you back. What limitations are your fears putting on you? And the reason I say look at your fears is because I truly believe that your fears are lighthouses to your greatest potential. Behind your fears is the greatest potential that you have here. It's like beacons. So follow your fears while you're following your bliss. Okay, it's not just follow one or the other. There's a beautiful divinity that happens when you actually marry the two together. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, where exactly are you making that assertion that yin energy is 5D and yang is 3D? One would have to think that 3D and 5D is all around us, and to diminish one by saying it's more 3D or 5D than the other is kind of what Mark Passio would say, a New Age deception, a divine masculine suppression, saying that it's 3D energy. So where does that come from?
I am so glad you asked that question. Why do you think that 3D is less than 5D?
I'd say it was, but...
You said I diminished it by saying it was 3D. So what is diminishing masculine energy or yang energy by saying it's 3D?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening with toxic masculinity. When we put a judgment on something as less than, we're taking something away from it. There is nothing wrong with 3D. You wouldn't be down here if you didn't have one of the most important jobs right now to execute in 3D. 3D is very important because it's where all the magic's happening right now for this planet. So it's not diminishing it by calling it 3D. What I'm trying to just use, and that's why I said for simplicity's sake, is it's your physical world, okay? What we see, what we can touch, all before us is our 3D reality. That is the physical aspect. That is your masculine energy. The feminine is the intangible. So the masculine is the tangible, the feminine is the intangible. One is certainly not better than the other. Both are equally important and both are needed for creation. And so it's very important that everyone understand that. We do not diminish one or the other because we think, oh, if I'm in 12D, I'm so much better than if I was in 6D. It doesn't work like that. They're just simply other dimensions that are different realities. It's our perception that shifts everything. One of the things I learned in yoga very soon off is the reason why we do headstands is so that our heart is above our head for once, and it takes the leadership role. And it's simply, when you're upside down, that outside doesn't change. The only thing that changes is your perception. So allowing your perception to shift and to mold and to be free to look at things in so many different ways is so important. Does that make sense, or did I not?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a diminishing factor. That's
It's
what
not
you
a diminishing
pointed out.
factor at all. But do you see how our world is teaching us to think that way? It is so important to stay in your power and not let these outside influences shape your reality and take things away from things that are not actually less than. Nothing is less than. Everything is equally important. So I'm really glad that you asked that. Thank you so much.
That perception of the deception.
You want to use the mic?
That perception of the deception was needed in order to recognize the other side as well, in order to come to
Absolutely.
the balance and the void.
Absolutely. And that's why I said, don't judge yourself when you go to one extreme or the other. And that's one of the things that I've recently learned is we look at, for instance, I do a lot of stuff on negative entities and the negative energies and all that stuff. They are great teachers for us in understanding truth. And we have no idea why they've taken on the role that they have in this particular time for us. For all we know, they could be contracts that we created that, okay, you're going to take on the evil and we're going to take on the good so that we can live out this amazing reality and we all learn from one another. Who knows how everything is? We have no idea. We can all have these grand thoughts and conceptions of how like it actually is, but none of us, the truth is, none of us actually really know. And so by going over to the extremes is how we learn and find the balance. So a lot of times when you hear people on their spiritual journeys, I mean, on my podcast, a lot of our guests will talk about how they went into drug addiction or sex addiction, alcohol addiction, in jail, almost died, suicide. You have to sometimes go to the extreme. Not always. Definitely not always. If it's part of your path, you may have to go to the extreme to really understand that level so that when you come back to balance, guess what? You're there as an anchor to help those who are stuck in the extreme polarities and need assistance out. You become the teacher. And that's what a lot of you are going to be realizing, is that you're here to teach in some capacity. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stand on a stage or stand in a classroom and teach. You could simply be teaching just in your everyday life, doing what you do, being the model. And people will maybe you'll have one person here or one person there. It doesn't matter. Nothing is less than or greater. If you help one person, you've made a difference. And you've made an impact on their life. And they may make an impact on someone else's life, and so forth. So that's really important. Are there any other questions? Yep.
Would the void ever become a comfort zone?
Would the void ever become a comfort zone? That's a good question. It probably could. In fact, I think that's why we're all here. Because when from what I understand, I could be wrong, but from what I understand, Earth is one of the hardest places to live out your soul lessons. It's really scary down here. Many souls will choose not to incarnate here ever. And so we come down here to leave this place and come out here so that we can get back here. It's really a game, isn't it? It's really interesting how this all works. But there's so much to be learned here as there is out here. And so I would say that I think you could have a comfort zone in the void. And remember, your mission is not to live out in the void here in this 3D world, okay? Because that's not why you came down here. You came down here to live in the extremes and come into the void and learn and come back out and come in. So there's this flow happening, right? It's always flow. Everything's always moving and changing. That's energy. Energy does not like to be stagnant. Energy's always moving, it's always expanding, it's always contracting, expanding, contracting. So yeah, so you're always coming in and out. So you never want to stay in one place because then you're not growing and learning. So that's a great question. Thank you. Does that help?
Yes, definitely.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Yeah. We'll get you a mic.
So I think what happens is once you do make it in the void, you find yourself in this void and you find yourself feeling like you're balanced. But then you decide to go into a new creation of the yin and yang. So that's what we're doing together, is we're creating a new matrix, a new reality to where we create together new experiences and maybe even a new universe. So eventually that shift will be from so many people holding space in the void to exit into a new reality, a new game, a new way to play, eventually. But you can still find yourself in the void now, and you think you've made it. You think, okay, I can hang out here for a while, but then you're called to go back into the old yin and yang to help support other people, not necessarily, you know, to do it for yourself anymore, but to provoke other people, so to speak, until we can go together. Does that make sense? Yeah, and multidimensional as well,
Yeah.
playing out different scenarios that happened in other lifetimes here with the same players.
Yeah, absolutely. It does keep you from being complacent. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you, Michelle. That was great. So it's this whole reason, like, because why are we here? Why are we doing this to ourselves? And it's because Creator learns through all of us. When we think about the body, you can think about the body as Creator, and all the little cells in our body are us and everything else around us. And we experience things through our cells, and information comes in through our cells, and we shift and we change. And so we are creating new experiences and living and having all this new information come forth for Creator through us. And so it's a very interesting and ever expanding concept. And it can sometimes get a little daunting to wonder, why would we do that to ourselves? But there's always things to learn, and not being complacent and not being in the comfort zone is really where all the growth happens. But at the same time, you need to be in the comfort zone for a little while in order to what's the word I'm looking for? Pardon?
Find the balance.
Process and integrate. Yes, process and integrate it's so important. So you don't always ever want to be, it's like everything, you can't just always be on one aspect. That's why the feminine and the masculine energies is so important to understand. You're always going to be kind of dancing between these two polarities throughout life, and sometimes you'll be in that middle, and you'll have these amazing moments of clarity and aha moments, like, oh, I get it now. It makes so much sense. All this time, it was just such a simple answer, and you often get a lot of that in the void, but then you have to go out and learn more and put more stuff together. So, is there any other questions before we finish up? Colin? Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so talking about that masculine and feminine energy, so I want to call Paul out, but this is kind of towards him as well.
You are in trouble.
So one of the things that I think a lot of people don't really think about is that when they're in their past, so like let's say their parent, maybe a father figure or a motherly figure, might have had a very specific select view of what that masculine and feminine energy was. And so because of that, we've taken it and we've embodied it. And so we might think that's actually the extreme, when in reality it's not. And so then we've been carrying that exact or brief description our entire life. And so then from that, I think we should really dive deep into what maybe our parents or people that we looked up to or thought were important and had an emotional connection to, and then took things from them, from that masculine and feminine, and like kind of test it and really see if that's really what it means. Because I mean, from my past, I won't get too far into it, but because of a certain thought of masculinity, because of my dad, I was never able really to get to that extreme. Like, yes, the universe shoved me into the extreme and I was able to come back from it, but I was very stuck in a selective mindset because of kind of what that one person had put onto me, because I thought that that was the right way. I thought that that was the extreme. And so coming out of that, it really changed my perception to really test all of them. So coming from more of that masculine energy, really ask yourself, like, one really big thing for me is that's like really about the toxic masculinity is men can't cry. Men can't be vulnerable. And like that's a weak statement. And I actually think it's the exact opposite. I think it's actually stronger if you be able to cry in front of them, because you're being able to be more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
You're being able to stay within yourself and share that emotion with that other person.
Yes, absolutely. Being vulnerable is so important, and that's actually been one of my major lessons because I was so far from my femininity, and it's one of my lessons going through right now. Well, it's a lesson that's been for the last decade I've been exploring, but really going even deeper into it, is allowing myself to be and allowing myself to be received. This is the receiving energy. This is the giving energy. And as an empath, I was always a giver, like always, like I massage. I was like always wanting to give. And when someone wanted to do something, I was like, no, it's okay, I don't need it, it's okay. And we often do that because we feel guilty. Like we the only thing we actually think it's okay to take on is other people's crap. And you want to really move into your receiving energy to allow that all to come in. And being vulnerable allows you to be held, allows you to be received by others in your most authentic place. And it's a very powerful part. So just to finish up here, please remember that you have been training for this for all of your lifetimes. All of your lifetimes has brought you here. You would not be here right now if you weren't already well prepared. And you likely have a very strong guidance team and angels protecting you and giving you the information and tools that you need, as well as the people that you come in to meet right here. Okay, your frequency family begins to expand as you start to live your authentic self. Because you're living your truth, your reality starts to live its truth, and you start to attract that stuff in like a magnet. And so living your truth, you will have the support show up. Why? Because you're supporting your truth. When you support your truth, the universe supports you in other ways in this reality. And so that's so important to remember. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for allowing me to live out one of my dreams. And my deepest wish is for all of you to have the clarity and the courage and the heart to live out your truth, because only you can have such a unique way of being here in the world, and you just never know who's going to need you the most. Thank you.